This is the new Insta360 Ace Pro, and in this video, I want to show you a bunch of footage that I've shot using this camera, and also we're going to talk about all the features that you're going to find in this new competitor in the action camera world. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Now, one of the big things with this camera is the ability to shoot in low light, and I'm just sitting under a street light right now, and this is what it looks like. And I'll talk more about this low light capability later on in this video, but I did just want to mention that this video is not sponsored by Insta360. They did send me this camera to test early. However, they didn't see this video before I posted it on my channel. However, my channel is supported by those of you who buy my LUTs to color grade your footage, and also my courses over on the Creator Film School. And that's where I teach you step by step how to make YouTube a full-time career. So I'll put a link down below in the description for where you could check that out after this video. Check, 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 check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? That's cool. So on the Ace Pro, there's actually meters at the top of the screen so that when you have a microphone plugged in, you can see exactly your audio levels when you're filming yourself. And the biggest thing with this camera is the whole design of this action camera, because it takes the standard look that you might find in like a GoPro or the Osmo Action, but you now have this flip up screen that Insta360 first introduced with the Go 3, the Action Pod case. So you're gonna get better quality out of this camera while also having this feature with this flip up screen, which is perfect for like vlogging style of content. You can see I'm just hand holding this camera. I have the stabilization turned on to the highest level, and you can just see how smooth this is as I'm walking around. Now, in terms of specs, you have a 1 and 1.3 inch sensor, so a little bit bigger than you find on other action cameras. It's the same size sensor that you find in the DJI Air 3. Now, also with this sensor, you get 4K up to 120 frames per second, so you could do some super slow motion if you want to do that with this camera. Now, the big thing is HDR. So you could shoot 4K, 30 frames per second, 24 or 25, and you get an HDR look. So right now, I'm shooting with this HDR. So the sky's gonna be better exposed, and you're gonna see more into the shadows. So in terms of color profiles, you have standard, vivid, and flat. And then also there's a bunch of predetermined color profiles for different scenarios, whether you're biking or you're skiing, or you wanna do vlogging, like I am here. And these presets will actually set up the camera in a way that's best suited for that situation. Now I'm gonna flip over to 4K 60 so you can see what the image looks non-HDR. And I'll put these side by side. So here's the HDR look and here's the non-HDR look. So when you're shooting above 30 frames per second, you don't have access to HDR. So you're not gonna have as much dynamic range when you're actually filming your shots. And I'll pull this off the tripod and walk around. And so at 4K 60, you could see what the shot looks like without this HDR look. And having this HDR in the camera just gives you more flexibility when you're shooting so that you could get a better looking shot overall when you're shooting at 24, 25, or 30 frames per second. So I have high stabilization turned on, it's 4K 30, and I'm just using the audio straight out of camera. So there's actually 3 different audio settings that you can use out of this camera. There is a directional setting, which is gonna be focused on whatever's in front of camera. Then there is a stereo setting, which I just switched to right now, and it uses the 2 microphones on the camera body. There's 2 pinhole microphones, and it creates a left and right channel that are a little bit unique to create more of a dynamic sound and get more of the environment. And then there is a wind reduction audio setting. So right now there's a slight breeze up here in the hills, turned on the wind reduction, and so this is what it sounds like. And the intention with the wind reduction is to give you cleaner audio if there is some wind in the environment where you're shooting. But in this vlog-like setting, the direction focus makes sense because you want to get clean audio from whatever's in front of camera. And to just access these modes, you go into the settings, second page, and you have these 3 audio options if you don't want to use something like a wireless mic when you're working with this camera. Now you can see I'm shooting with this camera both handheld, walking around with the stabilization on, and also I'm shooting with it on a tripod. And so you could use this camera in a variety of ways, and this camera has a special attachment on the bottom of it that's both magnetic and it also clips in. And the attachment that I'm using right now has both the 2-prong system and also it has a 1/4 20. So I could easily hook it onto my tripod or I could hook it onto one of my other mounts like my chest mount to be able to get that POV style of a shot. Now also on the side of this camera, I've connected the microphone input. So in terms of audio options, you could do internal audio, you could do external audio with this little input. It's a USB-C adapter on the side. And then also there is an option to do audio using Bluetooth AirPods. Now the big buzzword of cameras coming out right now is AI. And this camera has some AI features built into it. And the big thing is using what's called Pure Shot. So using the AI chip, it's going to help reduce the noise, improve the dynamic range, and improve the brightness in darker situations. And so you can see from some of this footage that I've shot at night, it definitely looks much brighter when you switch over to this mode. So I'm just doing a super low light test. I'm walking around a park at night. You see I only lit by these overhead lamps. And it's actually pretty dark out here. You have a handful of these lights around here, but that's about it. That one's super blue. This one's super orange. So you're definitely going to see some color shifting going on. But this is what it's like just late at night, walking around. Not a whole lot of light to be able to get an exposure. You are limited when you're shooting to 4K 30 frames per second. However, you could shoot in darker situations with this action camera, which is something that you can't really do on other action cameras and get a good looking shot. And so here's another side by side. Here is just shooting in 4K 30 in the normal video mode. And then next to this is using the pure video mode, which is using this AI enhancement. Now there's also an AI assistant feature that finds the most exciting parts of your shots and cuts those out to help save space on your card. Also just to automatically find the parts of your footage that are most important. So let me show you how this works. I've got my camera set up here so we could go through it together. But you just swipe left on the screen and it's gonna pull up the footage that you've shot previously. So I'll click on one of these shots and you'll see at the bottom there's this little flag icon. So the camera has identified 3 different highlights within this shot that seem to be the most important parts of the shot. And so you could click on this and it'll show you each one of these highlights, which is 6 seconds. And if you want to keep any of these highlights, you push the check in the upper right-hand corner and select which highlights you want to keep. Hit the little save button in the upper right-hand corner. And then what you could do is save these as individual clips or merge them into one new clip. So I'm going to save them as individual clips. The camera will go through and process these for you. And now you'll see at the top here, there's 3 new clips that are each 6 seconds. And so if you wanted to, you could delete that old clip and just keep those highlights. Now, if you don't like the highlights that were produced automatically, you could go through and change them yourself and add new highlights. You could click the button in the right-hand side, which has this little film strip icon. It's gonna bring up your whole timeline. You press and hold the little flag icon, and it's gonna start creating a new highlight off of the area that you've selected, and then you release when you want to finish that highlight. And so you could go through and delete the ones that have already been produced, or you can make new ones by selecting and highlighting a new section. And then when you're done, you could hit the check button and now you have new highlights and you could go through, save them as a new clip again, and delete the full file if you don't want to have all of the footage on your card. So an easy way to go through and check out your footage while you're out filming and then select certain sections, save it, and then delete the rest. Now, while I have you here with the camera set up, let me just go through how this camera works so you can kind of see the back-end experience of working with the Ace Pro. So this is your main screen, and on it, you're going to see a few things. You have your filming resolution and frame rate in the corner. You have this little button here, which is going to punch in 2 times. You have the width of your lens, so you could have action, ultra, dewarp, or horizon lock. You have your battery in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see the little AI button that says that AI highlights are turned on. In the left-hand side, it's going to show you how much card space you have left, and underneath that has HDR because we're shooting in 4K 30. Now, everything in this camera is performed through swipes. So if you swipe down, you're going to have your menus. If you swipe to the right, you're going to have your camera settings, and this is where you're going to set up your color profile, so you could go from standard, vivid, flat, all the other presets. You can either shoot full auto or you could go to manual and set your shutter speed, ISO, your white balance, your EV. And then when you swipe up, you're gonna have all the other settings. So you could have your stabilization here in the corner. You have high, standard, low, and off. You have your ratio, so you could shoot 16:9 or 4:3 in video. You have the duration, so you could set how long you wanna shoot for. You have your resolution, 4K, 2.7, 1080, and then your frame rates. So that's everything for video. However, there are a bunch of different modes that you can shoot in, and you just swipe across the screen. So when you swipe across, you could go from video to free frame video, to pure video, to time shift, time lapse, loop recording, slow motion, star lapse, burst photo, interval, HDR photo, just photo mode, and then we're back to video. Now you also have presets in the upper right-hand corner, which automatically change your settings based on what you're going to be doing. So vlog, diving, surfing, skiing, biking, and you can make your own custom ones as well. Now on the camera itself, you'll see on the side, you have your card slot, you have your USB-C, and I've taken the door off here. On the other side is where your battery goes. And then on the front of this camera, you'll see that your settings pop up on this screen. And when you're filming yourself, you pull the screen up and then you can see yourself. But the cool thing about this camera is that this screen can be used at all angles. So you could have it like a normal action camera. And then if you want to shoot vlog style, you flip it up. However, you could keep it down like this and be able to shoot shots where you're looking down at the camera, or angle this in a way where it's easier for you to see for the shot that you're trying to get. This is one of those things that's super useful with this camera, and I've actually been using it a lot when I've been playing with this monitor, because when you flip down, you can look down on the camera, and you're not having to put yourself in an awkward position to see behind the screen. Now also, this whole screen mechanism where it flips up feels pretty solid, and I don't feel like I'm gonna break this very easily. I think it's a super solid camera, and I can't see myself really destroying this unless I somehow got this screen caught on something and like ripped it off or twisted it in some weird way. Now, one thing to note, the screen only flips up and down. It doesn't twist at all. Now, I have the stabilization turned off. You can see it's a little bit shaky. So let's play around with the different stabilization, because with Insta360, the big thing about their cameras is the stabilization. Between the 360 cameras and the Go series of cameras, the stabilization is exceptionally good. So this camera has all those stabilization tricks and magic built into it. And let's just go through some different stabilization that you're gonna find. Right now, stabilization is turned off. And that's because I had the camera over there on the tripod. Now let's run through some different stabilization. And to do this, I'm just gonna do a simple walk, and we'll do it with each mode on. So first, we'll walk this way. I might talk about it for a second, and then I'm gonna flip the camera around using this cool flip screen. And now I'm just gonna walk towards this tree. So this is with stabilization turned off. You can see how shaky the footage is with no stabilization. And this is just kind of a baseline so we can get a sense of what each of the stabilization modes look like. All right, so now I switched over to the low setting, and this is what it looks like looking at me, moving around. Let's flip the camera, face this tree again, and let's just walk. And I'm not trying to be overly stable with my walk, because I do want to try and see what it looks like with some bumps and shakes in there, just so we could see what the difference is between each of these stabilization modes. Now I flipped over to standard. So this is going to be getting a lot more stable than those previous two shots. And we have one more setting when you're just shooting in video mode. And there is a extra setting that's even more stable. And I'll show you that in a second. So here is with standard. Let's walk towards this tree. I'm just walking in the same way that I had the other two. Now we're on high. So this is what high stabilization looks like. And if you notice, it doesn't crop in on any of these stabilization modes. So I'll flip this around. And now we're walking towards the tree with high stabilization. It's walking the exact same. And you can see how much better it looks overall. Now, with all these stabilization modes, you could also lock your horizon so that it doesn't dip left or right in your shot. So everything that I've been shooting up until now has been in the ultra mode. So you have an action mode, which is super wide. You have ultra, which is not as wide, but still super wide, but it has that kind of bubble look. Then you have de-warp, which makes it look more like a normal lens. It doesn't have that warping bubble effect of an action camera. And then you have horizon lock. And you can see I'm shooting on horizon lock now, punches in slightly on the footage. However, that horizon in the distance is always going to be flat. So as you're moving around, you could rotate this camera left and right until about 45 degrees, and then the camera will start shifting. So you have a limitation when you're using the horizon lock in the video mode. And so when you pair your stabilization with the horizon lock, you get a super stable shot. Now, the mode that's the coolest is what you'll find on the other Insta360 cameras as well, and that is this freeform mode. So the camera actually records the entire sensor. It's a square. And then using the Insta360 app, it does all the stabilization for you. And you can see when you go to the different modes, when it's horizon lock or 360 horizon lock, it is punching in on the footage. However, you can rotate this camera. I'm gonna rotate in 360 degrees right now. See how, and back to center. And the camera stays locked on the entire time, and you never lose that horizon in the distance. So this is a great feature to have if your camera's all over the place, it's bouncing left, right, down, up, all over, and you just want to keep your horizon level and not have a bunch of dipping. However, if you're just shooting vlog style content, if you're just shooting little things walking, you could use the stabilization built in, because when you're working in the freeform mode, you do have to go through this extra layer of using the Insta360 app, whether it's on your phone or it's on the desktop version, and you then have to export that footage out. However, if you do go through the app, it's really not that hard because you can import all the footage at once, put on the stabilization mode that you're looking for, and export them all at once. So it is super easy to use if you do want to work in this way and have the most flexibility when you're shooting. And this is the big advantage of working with Insta360 cameras in general. They give you that extra layer of being able to reframe your shots later by being able to take your footage through Insta360's applications. Now, another feature that you have on this camera is called clarity zoom. So at any point you can double tap in the footage, gonna zoom in 2 times. Now you're super cropped in on my face, but if you're shooting like a landscape and you don't want the ultra wide shot, it's gonna be better quality than if you were to zoom in post. So you have that added benefit of having a better looking shot by zooming in this camera 2 times. So it gives you an extra focal length to work with when you're shooting with this camera. Now the lens itself is a 16mm equivalent, and it's an f2.6. So that's what you're getting out of this camera. Now also you have gesture controls, so you could do a peace sign to take a photo, you could do your hand to start and stop recording, or you could use voice commands to be able to control this camera. For me, this is something that I'm interested in for overland style content because I could have the camera mounted up in my car somewhere and just give a gesture and be able to start and stop that recording. All right, so now I'm testing this camera in a car setup because I'm curious how this is gonna perform for overlanding, off-roading, because when we're shooting those kind of videos, we usually have GoPros mounted somewhere in the cab so that we could talk to them as we're driving and be able to like explain what's going on, give a little context. It just gives a place to be able to do some of this A-roll where you're talking on camera. The camera's an arm's stretch away, so it's 1 arm's distance for me away, and you can see how wide this shot is. I'm on the de-warp setting, and I'm just filming with the audio straight from the Ace Pro. So what you're hearing is the sound, and I'm just driving through downtown LA right now with the sun setting, and you can see downtown off in the distance off to my left here. But I really wanted to see how this performs, and now I'm actually just gonna let this camera roll. I'm gonna see if there's any sort of overheating or any issues with that when you're filming in this way. Now, in terms of things like overheating, I did an hour take in my car, had no issues with this camera. So far I haven't really pushed it to the limits where it's overheated in any way, but it is something I continue to test to make sure there is no issues when it comes to overheating. Overall, working with cameras past week seems like a great little camera. I definitely want to compare this to the GoPro and the Osmo Action to really see the difference between all 3 of these action cameras. So if you have any questions about the Ace Pro, please let me know down below in the description, and I'll do a follow-up video where I dig into all these questions and also compare some different cameras alongside this. And if you want to see more information about the Ace Pro, I'll put a link down below in the description to where you can go to Insta360's website, check out all the other features that are packed into this camera. And next, you should check out this video right here, which goes through some tips on how you can film yourself when you're outside making videos. I'll see you over there.